All right. Hello. Welcome. It's me, Bill Patton. My website is brainsports.coach. Go there now. And, when you're watching these, make sure that you put in there where in the world you are watching from, country, city, state, all that good stuff. Anyway, I want to talk about some of the fundamental understandings between player and coach that are essential for the student to um, improve along the maximum possible rate. Uh, I think Phil Sello, I think that's how you say his name, talks about the fall line, and if he's skiing, then the faster he wants to go, then the closer to the fall line he has to go. And if he wants to go slower, then he skis away from that. Sean, what's his last name? Brawley, Sean Brawley of the Inner Game brand of coaching, along with Tim Galway, came up with a formula that says performance equals potential minus interference. All right. So understanding and or a lack of understanding can either increase the interference or reduce it. Now, the number one thing that we want to understand is, what does our student want? What do they want? It's critical to understand that first. So one thing that I do when I get a new student on the court is I tell them this. I'm like, look, some research says that approximately 80% of the people who want to play tennis, all they really want to do is rally for 30 to 45 minutes with a friend and keep the ball going and get some exercise, instead of hitting one ball, picking it up, hitting two balls, picking them up, and just repeatedly picking up balls. And that's going to be their tennis. And then about 15% of people want to play a social set of doubles with their friends, or maybe a little bit of singles, and they would rather win than lose, but winning and losing doesn't really matter that much as long as they play pretty well and they don't embarrass themselves. That's about 15% of people. And then there's the lunatic fringe, which is the 5 or less people who are just playing all the time, and they have to play, they have to compete, and they want to beat you, and that's that. If they win, things are good. If they lose, things are bad. So it's really fascinating to me that I'm getting a lot of people who say, oh, I'm definitely the first one, and I might be the second one. And, I'm open-minded. And I get fewer people who say, yeah, I'm definitely the first one, and I'm probably also the second one, and I'm not sure if I'm going to become the third one. And every once in a while, though, I have a few people who really are into it, and they really want to improve pretty massively. But it's really important to understand that first. A lot of our coaching is catered to these 5% people. We somehow think that everybody needs to be playing matches, and that if they win, that brings glory to the coach and all that stuff. So that's the first thing, is understanding what is their ultimate goal. The next thing is understanding how they learn. And too much has been made about learning style. So I want to challenge you this way. If you're thinking that a person has sort of a finite learning style, like, oh, they're a visual learner, so everything I do is demonstration. Or they're a kinesthetic learner, so I'm going to guide them through everything. Or they learn verbally, and so I'm going to give them a bunch of commands. Then that's pretty limiting. And, there's another myth out there that people only use 10% of their brains, which is actually absolutely not true. Everyone uses all of their brain all of the time, except if there's damage, right? So if there's been a head trauma or a stroke or what have you, then of course, certain parts of the brain are impaired. But everybody uses all of their brain all of the time. Now, New research is starting to show that perhaps your brain changes shape, function, and circulation based on what you're doing. So a big part of what we do is we figure out, all right, what's the way that the student usually comes at things? What is the way that they're trying to learn how to play this game? And what are the best practices in them learning? And how do we help them make the shift towards learning in a way that is going to help them? Because one of the difficulties I find is that I'm teaching an awful lot of college educated, analytical, determined, tense, overthinking people. So, I've begun to understand that about people, is that this is what they do. They tend to overthink. So how do we get them not to overthink? So part of the problem is that coaches are seeking to be understood rather than trying to understand their student. And you can start to read your student. So do this. Here's what I want you to do today as the challenge, right? Watch carefully the faces of your students as they go about doing the things that you're asking them to do. And if you get this, right, then you're going to get kind of a concerned look. What is their concern? What are you worried about? Right? Or if they're like this, then, maybe they're uncertain. They don't understand, right? I see a lot of people who do this, and I'm like, wait a minute, are you trying too hard? So all that tension in your face is not going to help you hit the ball out there. So you can relax a little bit. So this is another big part of it, is that do we create a welcoming atmosphere where people feel at ease and they are relaxed and entertained to some extent? They can let themselves go. Does the coach has empathy for them and their plight? Or do they feel anxious and upset and tight and tense and stressed out? Because that's going to get in the way of learning. So there's another thing called the affective filter, which has been proven that as people's anxiety level goes up, then their ability to take in new information goes down. So, you've heard of math anxiety, I'm sure, right? So people come onto the court with tennis anxiety. Can I learn this? And they doubt their own ability. So most of what I do is I guide people into learning how to become their own expert. And the way we can do that is to get away from this medical model that people have and go more to a true coaching model. Because the medical model says this, the student is like the patient, and then the patient has something wrong with them. They have an ill, something is wrong with their stroke or their game somehow. So they go to the doctor, and the doctor is going to prescribe medicine or give physical therapy or something. The doctor will diagnose and then solve their problem and fix it for them. And then they will go away, and maybe they'll need regular doses of medicine moving forward. But the coaching model says that the person has everything they need in order to learn how to play well on their own. But the coach helps facilitate. So instead of me or you being the expert, so to speak, we're the facilitators. So we help them discover their own expertise. So we get them to experience what they're experiencing, see what they see, feel what they feel, and then that's going to be an important part of it. So a while ago, I had this amazing 90-minute interview with Torben Ulrich, who some people, Sean Brawley said that Torben Ulrich may have been the first inner tennis player on the tour. But whether or not you want to put a label on him, he's definitely a very deeply philosophical guy. And so we had this, I asked Torben, about how to learn how to play tennis. And he qualified his statement by saying that he's not a coach. But he started with this. He said, first, you have to know what you're doing. Because how are you going to change what you're doing unless you know what you're doing? And then how will you know if you're doing something different? So the most important thing for us to do is to build awareness of what's actually happening. And then when players can see that and they can feel that, then they can make adjustments. Like, here's an example. You get a beginner out there and they're hitting the ball way up in the air. And, they feel bad. And so, I say, well, wait a second, high shots are good shots. I mean, you just don't want that right now, but, you can hit a high shot when you need it. And that'll be called a lob, or a looping ground stroke or whatever you want to call it. So, but now for the sake of, rallying here and making it a little bit easier for myself and others, you want to learn to have the ball come down, right? So here's what you need to know. If the ball goes up in the air, it must have to do with the angle of your racket. So let's just pay attention to that for a moment and then just make some adjustments. And then, lo and behold, then they're able to keep the ball lower because they started to make a little adjustment in the angle of their racket at the contact point. Let's do a different example. So I have a young guy, he's 16, and he wants to play college tennis. And there's a certain mentality that you have to have when you're practicing, when you're going to play at a high level. So he had gotten into this pattern of hitting pretty well for a while. And then he would hit 4 or 5 shots in a row that were mistimed, or he was off balance, or something was wrong. And then he would get in this rut of hitting 4 or 5 straight shots, right? So, I pulled him forward and I'm like, hey, look, what's going on there? Why is there a reason why you're allowing that to happen? Because you can hit better than that. And he didn't really know the answer to that right away. So what I did is I look, the top players, when they're practicing for near perfection. Very, very close to perfection. And if they hit one shot that is not perfection, then they're going to extend their practice and continue going that way. Now, okay, you're not at that level, but here's the deal. If you have to take account for this, you have to pay attention to this, that if you hit 2 shots in a row that are not the kind of shots that you want, then you need to stop. You need to reset your mindset and go back to remembering what it is that you want to do. So now he understands what he has to do on his end, right? And now, if that's not happening, if he continues in that pattern, then we have to dig into, well, why are you doing that? Or why are you continuing to hit 4 or 5 bad shots in a row? I mean, are you not going to manage it? So he's got to learn how to have greater awareness of what's going on with him. Because, he agreed readily, you miss 4 or 5 straight shots in a row, and that's a game or 2 games gone. Because that could be, losing the end of one game and then getting down love 30 or love 40 in the next game. So it's really important to, have higher level players take on a lot more mental and emotional management of what they're doing on the court. But that doesn't happen if we're spoon feeding them all the time. So we came off the court on Saturday and we'd had these conversations, and I probably had about 3 or 4 different similar things that I said to this young man and that we worked on and he understood and took with him. And then the mom praised me. She said, what I like about you is you don't let him continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. She sees, she's had him with, every coach around. And I guess I'm the only one who doesn't allow for these problems to continue. So anyway, so that's just a little bit about the problem of not understanding or being understood. I'm going to close with this. All right. So there's an analogy that that Stephen Covey uses, and that's that, you climb this ladder, you put a ladder up on a building and you climb to the top of it and you get all the way to the top. It was a long, difficult climb to get way up there. And then you look over and you realize that you were on the wrong building. So, first we really want to stop and look at where are we going and who guides that. The player does. So if you're trying to teach, that to the 5% to somebody who all they really want to do is rally, then you're not really teaching them the way they want to be taught. They're like, hey, this isn't, I didn't like that guy because he was way too serious, right? Or, but if you have somebody who, really wants to start playing matches, but you don't teach them how to serve right away and you don't teach them scoring and some court etiquette, then they're not going to be ready to play that social set if all you're doing is hitting forehands and backhands, and trying to perfect the Roger Federer forehand and the whoever backhand you want to say is awesome. Then you're pretty far off track. But then you can hold out hope. If you can get people to the second thing, where they're playing socially, then there's a really good chance they can get the bug and they'll go further on, right? So you understand what your student wants. And this is the way I start every lesson is we come up to the net, we toss a couple of balls, we have a very, very short little mini rally, and I'm asking them, what do you want to work on today? And then we dig into that. What does that mean? What do you mean when you say you want to work on slices, right? What kind of slice? What's your objective there? What do you mean that you want to hit your forehand harder, right? Do you not mind if it goes out more, right? How about if we have you hit it harder and in the court? Oh, you saw that video by so-and-so who said the ultimate power forehand. And it's like, okay, I'm sorry, because there's just not enough context there. But that's it for today. One little news item is it looks like I'm going to be going to Australia coming up. And that's going to be at the end of January into the middle of February. And I'll be in the Sydney area. So if you happen to be in Australia, come on by. It's going to be great. So anyway, more details about that will be coming up. But thanks for watching. And go ahead and like it, subscribe it. If you liked it, share it out, and let me know where you're watching from. Thank you.